Welcome to the Next Door Neuro podcast, where we explore how your brain fuels your life and how to better fuel your brain in the modern world. Welcome to Next Door Neuro. I'm Jamie Maniscalco, a neuroscientist and wellness coach, and on this podcast, I explore a simple question. If your brain fuels your life, what fuels your brain? Each week, I sit down with thinkers, coaches, and practitioners to explore how our brains shape the way we live and how small shifts in mindset and behavior can create meaningful change in our day-to-day lives. Today's conversation centers around something that all of us experience, but that we rarely slow down enough to really think about: human connection. How we listen, how we communicate, and how we show up with the people around us. In a world that's increasingly digital, distracted, and fast-moving, those skills are quietly eroding. And yet, they may be more important than ever. My guest today is Dawn Wecker. Dawn is the host of the podcast Dawnversations and someone who has spent years having deep, meaningful conversations with people from all walks of life. Through those conversations, she's developed a unique perspective on what connects us as humans and what can get in the way. In this episode, we explore why most people aren't truly listening and how that can impact connection, how authenticity creates space for vulnerability, why asking better questions can transform relationships, the role of storytelling in helping us feel less alone, and how our inner dialogue shapes the way we show up with others. One idea that really stayed with me from this conversation is that we all have this voice in our head, a constant automatic stream of thoughts. And most of the time, we don't question it. We treat it like truth. But that voice isn't actually who we are. It's something our brain is generating. It's shaped by our past experiences, patterns that exist in our lives, and our predictions about the future. And when we don't recognize that, those thoughts can shape how we feel, how we show up, and how we connect with others in ways that aren't always helpful. But when we start to see that voice as something that we can step back and observe, rather than something we have to believe and feel, it can create mental space. And in that space, we gain the ability to choose how we interpret and respond to that voice, rather than reacting to it automatically. Let's dive in. Dawn, so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, Jamie, I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait to chat. I always love talking to you.
Oh my gosh, likewise. So I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about your experience podcasting. So you've hosted an interview-style podcast for, what's it been, about 4 years now?
Yeah, just had my 4-year anniversary. Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So after having interviewed so many people and spoken to so many people with different perspectives, what has surprised you most about others, about people in general, about yourself, that 4 years of doing these types of interviews has given you?
Gosh, I would say my knee-jerk reaction to answer is that we're all so alike. I think on the news they portray it so like we're all against each other and everybody's against, But I never felt that way. I talk to people in different countries, men, women, young, old, and everybody is so similar. We all have the same basic wants and needs as people, as humans, in relationship to each other and in our lives. And I just found that fascinating.
And what are some of those themes that you were seeing when we think about the similarities? People across the world, different ages, different races, genders, ethnicities, religious perspectives, things like that. What do you see that come to your mind that are the common themes or threads across humans?
I would say that it's more that people want to help other people a lot more than we all realize. That people want to be heard and validated. A lot of the people that were experts wanted to share the information not to make money, not to get famous or get their name out there. They wanted to get the information out there to help people. And I loved that. I mean, a lot of my podcast was self-help. So that definitely added to that. But sometimes experts just want to come on to promote their book or a seminar that's coming up. I see that on a lot of podcasts that I consume, but I didn't experience that. In general, my guests were there because they wanted to help and they wanted to get their information across to my audience about how people can help themselves. So I really liked that.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I think it resonates. I think we all, you get to a certain stage in life. And for most of us who are in, full-fledged adulthood, especially, I think you get into this generative phase of life where you have taken so much. As you're growing up, you're in school, you're learning from others, you're absorbing, you're the sponge. And then you get to a place where you're like, I've absorbed so much, I've synthesized so much, I have my own ideas now. I want to give back. I want to make the world a better place for those around me.
What, in your perspective, that's how you get your name.
Yeah, right? And doing that organically versus trying to just promote.
Right, exactly. And that's how people want to be related to. They want the information to seem credible and not shoved down their throat, just genuine interest in helping other people by getting that information to them. That's what I always liked.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
What do you think compels us? The whole concept of helping others and altruism makes a ton of sense, evolutionarily, things like that within families or small communities. But a podcast is a much more widespread community. We're looking at state level, national level, global level of distribution. We are now interested in helping people we will never meet, we will never know, we'll never know existed, and we'll never know we had an impact on. What do you think drives that interest in helping people in this way that feels so distant and indirect, yet still compelling?
Yeah, I think it's what you said, that you can hit this broad audience from all over the world with your message. And it's not just in front of 100 people at a seminar. You can, and just to make those connections. And there's a lot of people that can't afford therapy, that can't afford to go see specialists. And so for these specialists to come on a podcast and get their information out and what they do and what their passion is, it opens it up so that they can tell other people. If it doesn't impact the audience listener, they may say, well, this doesn't affect me, but I know my neighbor down the street has issues with this. So it's just a way to reach a way broader audience and get your message out for people that maybe don't want to read a book. Yeah. Not everybody likes to read, so they can get the facts out there or their information out there for people, that may not have heard of them otherwise.
Oh, I love that. Was there a moment where you started to see this theme come up and start to intentionally curate this within your guests, or did it all really happen organically and you just kind of watched as it unfolded?
Yeah, it was kind of a little bit of both. I felt like I tried to, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to go in a roundabout way. I felt like I tried to create a very calm atmosphere where people felt relaxed. And once that happened, I could just tell it would click with the person. And not right away, because, people have to shake off their nerves and all that stuff. But it was like once they got comfortable, then they could really talk about what they were passionate about and really explain why they got into what they got into and why it's important to them. And that made it such an authentic conversation. And I think so much more tangible for them, the listener or viewer, just because they could tell that the person was authentic. And I always wanted it to feel like people were eavesdropping on somebody sitting at a table next to them at a restaurant or in the salon, just eavesdropping and hearing, oh, wow, that's interesting information. I want to know more. I just wanted to have that kind of environment. So it was just that want from me. You could tell it started to spill over on the guests that I had where they felt relaxed, that they could give their authenticity and give their viewpoints. So that was my goal.
I love that. And I think it's sorely needed in this day and age, where I feel like more often than not, people are listening while they're waiting to talk. You're kind of half listening while you're planning what you have to say next, that these opportunities for real, in-depth, high eye contact human connection, whether it's digital or in person, are becoming rarer and rarer in a world in which we're with other people and staring at our phones or being pulled by distractions or constantly looking for an email. These moments of in-depth human connection, how did having more of those in your life and really intentionally bringing them in change how you think, how you feel? How did they change you as a person, Dawn?
Well, I am not a great listener always. I try to be, but when I did hair, that was a huge lesson in how to listen to what the person wants. More importantly, what they don't want. That's the most important message you can get from somebody when they're telling you about their hair. But
so they don't all want the Jamie cut? They're not all coming in being like, as close as you can get to the scalp, let's just...
And then I never see him again.
Yeah, right? Or it takes him 10 years to grow it back out.
Yeah. No, that started my journey of learning how to listen for sure. Yeah. And again, I'm not perfect at it, but like you said, learning to listen to people and not just think about what you're going to say, before they even get the last word out, you already know what you're going to say and you're not really listening. And so what did train me with the podcast was the fact that I did not have scripted questions. So I had to listen because whatever they said, I needed to have a follow-up question. And there were so many times where I would just be listening and then I would be like, oh gosh, I need to, this is my show. I need to pay attention. So yeah, no, that helped me see that. And I was always told you need to be interested, not interesting. Yeah. And so that's what really brings a connection with people, is feeling like you're genuinely interested in what they're saying. There's no worse feeling than not feeling validated. Somebody just glazing over when you're talking and it's like, no, I want to be heard. It's so rare anymore for people to really pay attention without picking up their phone or, seeming distracted.
Yeah. And did you find that was a skill that you developed and honed and crafted? And how did it change the way that you thought or that you interacted with people more broadly? I'm thinking through, most of us probably don't listen as much as we wish we would or that we think we do. And when you're really forcing yourself to on a public platform where there isn't the option to kind of not do it fully, you have to be there doing it fully in the way you structured it. Did it change the way you interact with people day to day? Did it change the way you think? Did you have to try to be interested at first, but then found that you are just more naturally interested as you flexed that muscle?
Yeah, I would say the more interested I appeared, and actually was, but appeared to my guest, the more forthcoming they would be with more and more information. If I was just nodding my head a little bit or whatever, they didn't seem to come back with as much information. So I really wanted to make sure that my guests knew I was listening to what they were saying, and that made them comfortable enough to turn around and, expand. And that's how conversations should be for all of us. We should listen to what they're saying and follow up, just because you can ask open-ended questions and maybe not get a lot of feedback. So I don't know. I do feel like it helped my conversation style and my listening skills. Yeah, for sure. The whole thing is authenticity. You just really want to come across as authentic so that somebody feels that they can be vulnerable with you.
Yes. And what I think is fascinating is you can be authentically you in so many different ways, and yet they all tend to encourage openness and vulnerability. We're not looking for a specific type of person necessarily to be open and vulnerable with. We're looking for someone who's authentic, whether that's authentically excited, authentically caring, authentically in-depth, authentically intense. We see the real human behind that, and we feel comfortable sharing in a way that even if you're the most meaningful person, if you're lost in your own head, we're not going to open up to you.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that if you struggle with having a conversation with anyone, The best place to start is asking them about them, because that's everybody's favorite topic, is talking about themselves. Nobody wants to sit there and hear about how, oh, I just love dogs so much. I'm just a dog lover. It's like, whoop-de-doo, good for you. If you're a cat lover, that doesn't appeal to you. But once you find out that that person is a cat lover, then you can start asking, what made you like cats? Did you have a cat when you were a little kid, or did you just always want one? That's what gets if you pique their interest and they feel it, that they're interesting to you, that's all. They'll love you and they won't even know why. They won't even know why they love you. They just know they will want to talk to you again.
Yes. And then the magic in my perspective, because I feel it too, when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody who asks nothing reciprocal, it's real challenging. You're like, okay, like what else can I bring up? Okay, but the second that you are an interested person in them and they're an interested person in you, that's when these magical 2-hour-long conversations that came out of nowhere happen, where you really change the way you think and you foster a real strong relationship. And I feel like many of us are losing this skill to no fault of our own, because we're constantly consuming. We're constantly in our own heads. Yeah. We stop thinking about others as human beings, I think, implicitly. And we're spending so much time thinking about ourselves and with our phone looking down, that we've lost this ability to ask someone else about, what's the most important thing in your life right now? Or more than these superficial questions. How was your day? Good. What are you excited for the weekend? Okay, how do we get past that? What are some strategies that you might think about? I guess if people out there are like, well, I try, but people just give me these poor answers. Are there certain questions that you like to ask that really tend to open people up?
If I'm really making an effort, I would say that instead of just the generic, how are you? How's it going? Whatever, you could come up with something. Maybe you ran into some bad traffic on your way to go see that person. And then you just say, did you hit a lot of traffic? I hit a bunch on my way here. And they may say no and just shut down. And then, okay, they don't want to have a conversation. That's fine. Yeah. But, most people, more often than not, will say, yeah, I saw a wreck, or, and then you just, well, what do you drive? Just, you can make a conversation happen. But for some people it's a struggle. And I think it's a struggle because the further we get away from it, the harder it is to even think about the steps to take, and when people are using their phones as a means of socializing, it's not socializing. You're not doing the eye contact. You're not doing the feelings of knowing why a person, being compassionate, being empathetic, that sensitivity, all that stuff that makes us human that you can't get from ChatGPT or AI, all the stuff that makes us human is what we all crave, that connection of being accepted and having our feelings validated. And so I think just going back to the human component, make somebody feel human. How did that feel when you were running late this morning? Were you stressed out? Could you feel your heart racing? I think just making them tap into their humanness too helps.
I love that. The other thing that stands out to me when you think about how different communication is when it's digital like that versus in person or live, you get a lot of time to think about the perfect response or what you want to say. If you're responding to an email, you're responding to a text, you can craft it, you can adjust it, you can readjust it, you can put it into ChatGPT and modify it. You can't do that with real live human interactions. And so we're fundamentally not practicing the impromptu nature of what does a real reaction look like? How do I think through my emotions in real time? How do I interact with someone without going to edit or copy paste or adjust? Right. And I think that kind of comes out when people get anxious when they don't have that buffer of, well, I'm not going to have time to think. Just text me. I don't want to talk to you. I think some of that's because you can craft and you can home and you can get to what you want perfectly, when real conversation shouldn't be perfect. It should be messy. You should say, wait, no, that's not what I meant.
Right.
And I think we're losing that kind of authenticity, as you were saying.
Yeah. And I think you and I had a conversation about this before about inflection and tone that can be read into text messages. And that is so huge because the person could completely mean something harmless. But if you're in a mood, or if you are predicting that they are in a mood, then you may see their sentence that ends with a period as anger or impatience or whatever, something negative,
Yeah.
when they could have accidentally put a period or just meant it. No, period. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the interpretation is where we can get into the weeds too. And that is never good.
Yeah.
Just assuming what people's feelings are. You can do that in real life, but in real life, you have a little bit more of an opportunity to look at the face and hear the tone and say, oh, he didn't mean it like that.
Yeah.
He didn't mean it like that. He was kidding around. I could tell by the way he looked, he was kidding.
Yeah.
You can't do that through text
No.
or email.
And it's such an ingrained human capacity. We struggle to even put it in words. Like you were saying, it's just how he looked. Like, you're just gonna have to trust me. He looked this, like, we can't describe exactly what it was about the in-person interaction that made you have confidence or understand the intention, but we know. And that to me opens up all this fascinating, the subconscious emotional components of this, where we have conscious language that we can express, but we have so many feelings, so many understandings that we struggle to put words to. But just because we can't verbalize it, language is such a limiting factor.
Right.
Just because we can't express it with words that we know in our vocabulary doesn't mean that the emotion's not real. Doesn't mean that you get it, that the concept isn't there, that the intention isn't there. You just struggle to say it.
Right.
And that's always been fascinating to me.
Me too. And body language, I think that when the resting bee face, if you feel like people won't approach you, look approachable. Don't just sit there and have a scowl on your face and expect people to be like, oh, wow, she looks great. I think I'll go talk to her. No, you have to look happy. You don't fake it, but at least look like somebody that you would want to approach.
Yeah.
Don't look like somebody that's scary and nobody's going to want any part of that. So I feel like body language is huge, and it's easy to say nobody ever comes and talks to me, or I can never get people to start a conversation. Sometimes you have to take that first step of going up to somebody, and it is scary.
Yeah.
But the worst they can do is just kind of dismiss or whatever. Then you try somebody else. It's not going to happen every single time you make an attempt at a conversation. But yeah, I think the way that we look is a big part of it. We need to look like we are approachable.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something there's so many people that I have met in my life, and I'm a really outgoing person, so I don't tend to struggle as much with initiating a conversation, but I still get those times, and it was much worse or much more challenging when I was younger, where you're intimidated. That person, whether they're really attractive in your mind, whether they are what you think is the smartest person in the room, and that's intimidating, whatever reason they might be intimidating, what I've found is scratch beneath that surface, or your perception of the surface. And most people, like you were saying, are genuinely interested. They're genuinely interesting. They're looking to help. And all of a sudden you start peeling the onion and seeing their layers. And that initial intimidating feeling just melts away because you realize, they're a great person too. And what I've found is when they haven't been, it's not my fault. It's theirs. They're just not easy.
Right. Yeah. I had plenty of podcast interviews and hair clients where it started off a little rocky, and I was thinking, this is not going to be good. And slowly, I think people have guards up, especially nowadays. I think that there's so many opinions out there. People don't know what they can say and can't say without offending someone, and so it does make conversation more difficult. But yeah, there's been plenty of instances where I just thought, oh, this isn't going to be good. And then it ended up being somebody that was like super cool that I had a great conversation with. So you really don't know what you're going to get unless you try. You could end up having a best friend after the conversation. You just don't know.
And how does that change in the public sphere? When you are having these conversations, getting to know people, but you're doing it on a podcast format where you are sending out this conversation to hundreds of thousands of people who can access it or more. How does that change the dynamic? Do you feel that there's a performative aspect that comes in, or does that get easier over time as you're doing this podcast? What is it about talking to somebody in a public platform that you see as unique?
That's a really good question. I guess in my mind, I try to just keep it as like how you and I are right now, not thinking, oh, this is going to get broadcast. I just wanted it to be, and maybe some of the COVID, with people having to Zoom and all that during COVID when the world shut down, maybe that kind of helped prepare for that. I don't know, but I guess I have always just felt during the conversation that it was just me and that person, and it just happens to be something that I put out, out to the world. As long as it's a genuine conversation, I think it is received well. Yeah. And if you feel comfortable and I feel comfortable, it's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
From the audience's perspective, a lot of your interviews, they're very story-based, whether it's autobiographical or you're bringing your stories in the context of your expertise, who you are. What compels us as the audience to be interested in listening to other people's stories? Why is that such a compelling thing for us to do, as opposed to tell me what I need to do to be a better communicator? Just list the things and I'll do those. Why do I want to hear a story about someone who struggled with it and then figured out a way to get there?
Yeah, that's great. I think people are nosy. I think that's a big one. People are nosy. But I think also people want to feel like, oh gosh, it's not just me. When they hear somebody say, oh, when I grew up, my dad was not really around, or it wasn't a good communicator. I didn't really grow up with that kind of father figure. Anybody out there has that same issue is like, okay, I want to hear where they take this story. What happened? Or they're fine. They seem fine. So there's hope for me. So I think that's the main thing. Yeah. The relatability of it.
Yeah. It normalizes a lot of things that we lose in smaller communities. You might be the only person you know of struggling with depression that you know of, because statistically, lots of us struggle with depression. Most of us don't talk about it. But then when your community expands from the people you live with, the people you work with, the people you go to school with, to your community online, you can easily find people who share your same challenges and recognize, wow, when I look at the whatever it is, 360 million people in the United States, there's so many people dealing with this. I am not the only one.
Right.
That's such a unique experience in human culture.
Yeah.
To think back over the ages, we have this ability to see so much further, so much broader than our ancestors did.
Yeah.
Do you think that is something that is uniquely special to podcasting? Do you think that is something that people recognize and embrace and search out, or it's more of this byproduct that we happen to find our people just because humans look for that?
Yeah, I think humans are looking for that. And I think a podcast is a great format for that, for people that maybe are lonely, depressed, isolated, don't have the means, don't have friends, don't have somebody close to them that they can talk to and connect with. This way, somebody could just search out depression, search out anxiety, and have just lists and lists of all different kinds of options of things that they can listen to. And my podcast was, I had some heavy issues. I talked about suicide. I talked about anxiety. I talked about depression and alcoholism and drug addiction. I had a lot of heavy topics, but I tried to keep them light, not in a way of like, it's not a big deal, but more in a way of, it's not just you. There's a lot of us out there that have struggled with one thing or another. And so I wanted it to be where people who may be a little bit more isolated or scared they could just put in their buds. No one would even know what they were listening to, and they could be getting some feedback or support that they need without anybody else knowing.
I love that. Did you ever hear from people where people would reach out and say, "Oh my gosh, Dawn, like I just had to tell you"?
Yeah. It didn't happen a lot, but it happened often enough for me to feel really good about it. Because sometimes you don't hear anything. You're like, this one's going to knock it out of the ballpark. This was great. It was a great guess. And I had great questions. And this is going to be, and, crickets, you don't hear anything. And it's like, oh, gosh. And then you get an email just from one person that said, I loved that specialist that you had on, the expert. They had so much information. I wish you would have them on again. Or can you tell me how to get a hold of them myself? I did have that. And to me, one is enough. If I heard from one person that they said it helped them, that's enough for me. That's enough for me to keep going, and helping somebody if it helped one person, especially when it came to the suicide stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's dark. That's a dark place that somebody is in. Yeah. And to know that maybe I know I did help someone that was in that place.
Yeah.
My gosh, you can't get any better than that.
Oh my gosh, no. And then you start thinking about the ripple effect of that. So let's say your podcast, your communication, you as Dawn, got someone away from their suicidal thoughts or potential actions. Right. The rest of their life, they're impacting other people. In largely positive ways, I believe. Most of us have a lot of positive influence in the world that we never see. And your influence now extends beyond that one person to the 500 people they've really influenced, and those people are better off. And so it just kind of trickles like a ripple in a lake, something like that from dropping a pebble. And now all of a sudden you really impacted one person, but you kind of impacted 500 people through the one podcast episode.
Yeah, that's just the most rewarding part of all of it is it's rewarding to meet lots of new people and find out new information. And that's what I did. If something came to my mind, it's like, yeah, I want to know more about that. I'd try and find an expert. That's how I met you. Yeah. Try and find an expert. But yeah, getting that information out there and then having it really help someone. I don't know. I just can't imagine any dollar amount that would be better than that.
Absolutely. The saying that, so, when I was teaching, I used to be a college professor, and it was a struggle because you work your butt off to teach these great courses and the students are great, but they're in this place where, they're, from their perspective, they're paying tuition, you're doing your job. So it's not this profuse, like, thank you so much, Dr. Maniscalco. Thank you, thank you, thank you. When it does happen though, you're like, oh my gosh. And a colleague once told me, they were like, for every one student that comes to you saying you were amazing, there are 20 that think it, but will never say it. And I was like, that always got me through. I was like, there's 20 students out there that just love my class. And then it made me stop and, kind of get like meta about it and think through how many people in my life have impacted me in ways and I haven't shared it. And so since then, I've really started trying to share much more, like, you are so important to me. I really appreciate this. Going above and beyond to tell people in ways that I never used to. And oh my gosh, does it feel good to tell other people they're great. It is a wonderful feeling to be like, you really helped. And most people are just so gracious about accepting that. And it makes you realize we don't say it enough.
No, that's all the way back to what we were saying about the human connection. And I mean, who would get sick of hearing that? Who would ever get sick of somebody saying, wow, you are so great. Yeah. You changed things for me. I can't imagine one person that would be like, old news.
Right. Get in line.
Yeah, just hearing that is just magical. It feels so good to feel validated like that. Yeah. That's awesome.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced along the way in terms of creating a consistent podcast, thinking about how to cultivate something impactful? Where did you see the biggest hurdles over the course of the 4 years that you were consistently interviewing people and getting a podcast out that was high quality, impactful, and that actually helped people?
My biggest hurdle was me. I wanted to appeal to everyone. I wanted to have a variety show because I wanted to be able to talk about whatever I wanted, but I also wanted a show that everyone could listen to, meaning toddlers, elderly, men, women, college, whatever, no matter what their background was. I wanted to appeal to everyone. Not possible. So that was my biggest hurdle, was wrapping my brain around the fact that my show is not going to be for everybody, or every episode is not going to be for everybody, because you can't have episodes about divorce and then the next week about a marriage therapist, and the same person isn't going to listen to all these different things that are going on. But yeah, that was probably my biggest hurdle, was me thinking that I needed to appeal to the masses. I didn't think that I needed to niche down. It wasn't that. It was just, I guess I just really wanted to help everyone. I really did. As stupid as that sounds, I did. I wanted to be like, okay, now we've helped all the people with anxiety. Let's talk about autism. It's just like, I wanted to touch all the bases and try and figure out all the solutions and get every expert on. And you just can't. You can't do it all. But I wanted to. That's what I was trying.
Yes. Oh, and I feel that. What a wonderful statement about you, in my perspective, that you just wanted to help as many people as possible. And it ended up being a hindrance because you can't speak to everybody. You kind of realize the breadth of the human condition or the human perspective.
Yeah.
And you just can't. There's too many people, too many diverse perspectives.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the challenge that manifested out of that? And what did you change to, whether it was internal or external, to really focus on, this is going to be for a certain set of people, and I'm not going to worry about trying to broaden it to make it more accessible, for example?
I think what changed was I decided that I wanted to just find things that I was interested in and have experts on that. And I figured if I'm interested in it, there's got to be other people that are interested in it too, instead of me trying to appeal to the masses. So then when you start getting into spirituality, that's not going to appeal to everybody. But I was wanting to know more about my spiritual side. And then towards the end of my podcast, I wanted to get into about the voice in your head, because I do feel like everybody has that voice that usually has negative information to say. And I thought, let's make fun of that. Let's make that a fun thing where it's like just the voice in your head that's constantly talking you out of doing normal things, but we all have it. And that's where I felt like towards the end, I was like, this is where I want to take it, because I really do feel like that's relatable for everyone, that we all have that voice in our head that makes us feel less than a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So.
It's usually the very negative self-talk voice in our head. What was the name of yours? Was it Carol?
Yeah, Carol.
Yeah, Carol. Okay. So for those who are not aware, Dawn went from a podcast that really was interview focused. She'd bring on people. I was a guest of hers and talk with them. And then she pivoted more recently into a solo type episode where she's actually talking about a topic, but she also represents the voice in her head,
right?
Talking to her. And Carol is rarely an affirming positive, if ever, an affirming positive voice in your head, right?
Not at all. Yeah, it's the real voice. It's thoughts that really I have in my head when I think, oh, this is a good idea. It's like, why would you think that? Step back. No, nobody wants to hear about that. And to me, it was just fun to do.
And what was the driving motivation to bring this format, to bring your inner voice, something really intimate and personal to you, into a public sphere in a podcast?
Really, because I thought that a lot of people would be able to relate to it. Again, not trying to appeal to the masses, but I just thought, oh my gosh, so many people are going to be like, that's not just me. There are other people out there, and let's make fun of it. Let's make it lighthearted. Let's joke around about it, because it's not serious. And that voice is not, it's not you. It's not a real voice. It's not a person that's saying these things. It's crap you're making up in your head that has no merit. And so I would just wanted it to be funnier so that people could laugh at themselves and realize that it's not so serious. We all have that voice.
I absolutely love that. And I love that you're bringing it in a humorous way. You could bring it in an educational way. You could stop and
Yeah.
say, we all have negative self-talk and this is XYZ. And honestly, that's my inclination. I'm a professor at heart. I'm like, if we all learn about everything, we'll all fix our problems. And it's like, that's not, people are looking for entertainment. People are going to learn
Yeah.
through experience. And there's something about the power of humor and
Right.
making fun of something to really take it down a few pegs in terms of how much we respect or perceive the importance of this negative self-talk in our head.
Right. Yeah. And that we think it's fact. Just because it's in our head, we take it as real and true. But that's not necessarily the case. It's
Yes.
just a voice.
The stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's detrimental. It's things that we tell ourselves that could talk us out of opportunities that we should be taking. I think so it's important for people to know that that voice is not the voice to be listening to.
I absolutely love that. And I think it's such a fantastic way to approach this because I think we think a lot about toxic relationships, right? I'm in a toxic relationship. I'm with this person, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, boss, whatever it might be, coworker, and they're so negative towards me. I can't stand being around this person. They make me feel terrible about myself. And we are all very compassionate and understanding when someone's facing that. And it's terrible. That should never happen to you. But what we often don't do is recognize that we're doing that to ourselves.
Right.
And it's worse because we're doing it constantly and we never escape it. And what we don't realize is we tell ourselves those stories, we reinforce those thoughts about ourselves. And every time you think that thought, you're carving a new neural pathway that's reinforcing your ability to think negatively about yourself. And we let that go unchecked. And it is more detrimental. It's like having a best friend constantly with you who is the nastiest person. Like, would Carol ever speak to anybody else the way she speaks to you, Dawn?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. Or if you think about somebody that you love, whether it's your child or your grandma, your mom,
Yeah.
whoever, just think of somebody that you just love so much that you would just defend them till the end. And would you tell them that they're so stupid or they're fat or you shouldn't wear that, that looks really dumb? No, you would never ever ever do that. So why do we do it to ourselves? Why do we allow ourselves to talk to ourselves that way?
Yeah. And why do you think we do?
I don't know. I don't know if it's something that we heard as a child. you know um you always make us late. You're never on time. You're always, if you weren't lazy, your room would look nicer or something like that. And maybe it's just like some negative thought I don't know. I really don't. I know we all have it. I don't know where it stems from, but it seems to be something that you can talk yourself out of. You don't have to think the negative thoughts that you think all the time. I think what I've heard from a lot of my shows and just in books I've read and stuff, it's just the awareness, being aware, like, oh, I'm having some weird thoughts right now. And just being aware of the thoughts and not taking them as fact. Just, that's an interesting observation. And laugh at yourself. Laugh at the thoughts. Make it light. Make a joke of it.
Yeah.
So, it's not as serious as what it is in our head.
And is that the approach you've taken personally when thinking about your relationship with Carol, your inner voice?
Yeah, it's kind of fun with Carol because I can come up with some really good zingers, but they come very easily. So I know that my mind still works that way because it doesn't take much for me to come up with the material. But yeah, I think we're all hard on ourselves. And I don't know why that is. If we're trying to beat somebody else to the punch by saying, oh, if I would just pay better attention before somebody else says, if you would just pay better attention, I don't know what the reason is. But it's ugly and it's not good for you. And like you said, if you're building pathways that make it easier and easier to talk that way to yourself, that's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary to think that you're just making it all the easier to feel terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so much cool stuff that goes in my perspective, cool and interesting, but also really detrimental. So I'll just kind of cool conceptually, that goes into this rumination and negative self-talk. And a lot of it comes down to, at least in my perspective and from what I've read, it's a lot about how our lives have shifted in the modern world. So a lot of this is when you're embodied in work, when you're doing manual labor, when you are physically engaged with the environment around you, you're very in the present, you're in the moment, you're very sensory focused. So you don't tend to, your brain is in a state where it's not self-thinking and in these loops. But when we are not physically in the moment, our brain goes into daydreaming, self-reflecting, considering events that just happened, how things we'd like to go. And that is the moment, and for me, where a lot of self-talk comes in. Oh, you shouldn't have said it that way. Oh, did you see the look? Man, they think you're stupid. All of these kind of negative thought loops happen because we're not as embodied in our lives as our ancestors were, that were much more like we were constantly moving, we were constantly working. And so for me, what I've found is a lot of times the easiest way to get out of my own head is to do something that forces me to be physically present, whether it is taking a walk, whether it is doing a puzzle, whether it is, I don't knit, but I think that would be a great example of you're physically focused on the environment and you don't allow your brain to then be daydreaming or thinking. And so for what I found is when I'm really stuck in my head, being able to really direct myself and say, okay, we're going to go take a walk, or okay, you're going to brush the dogs out because their hair is everywhere. And then I'm focused on something external to me. That has worked so well. And that pause, whether it's 5 minutes or 50 minutes, tends to reset me.
Wow. Do you think a lot of it is the actual physical, being physical too? Not just distracting yourself and doing something to be present, but like going for a walk, going for a run, exercising. Do you think that plays into it too?
Yeah, I do. I think it doesn't have to be exercise or movement per se. There are things about movement. They release, exercise can release endorphins, things like that, that can generally improve our mood, which can help with that. But in my perspective, it is being in the sensory moment. So another way to think about this could be, if you're a meditator, meditation is really good for this. If you're focused on whether it's something visual, or a lot of people focus on the breath, you're really focused on the sensation of breathing. If you're focused on the sensation of breathing, you're not in your own head thinking about yesterday, the day before, or 2 days from now. You're thinking about right now. And I think it's much more about our senses. Our 5 senses really bring us into the present moment, because you don't ruminate, you don't worry about the present moment. You worry about the past and the future. And so here, by forcing yourself to be in the moment, in the present, regardless of what you're doing, you're forcing yourself not to overthink things that are so easy for us to overthink.
Right. Okay, I'm not trying to take over your podcast, but I have a question for you.
Clearly, I hate talking, Dawn. Clearly, I hate this. So yeah, please don't.
So you had a cancer scare. How did that change your thought process, the way that you think about things? Because that's facing your mortality. Did you go through where you have an epiphany? Did you go through something where you're like, I have been so terrible to myself, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or I need to be more like this towards my family or my friends. Life's too short kind of thing. Do you feel like that plays a part in the way you are?
Yeah, 100%. I think it wasn't like in the movies for me where it's like, oh my gosh, I was diagnosed, now I'm a different person. It was much more incremental and integrated into where my life was. So I had started practicing a lot of these wellness practices, a lot of affirmations, intentions, perspective shifting, all of this stuff before I got diagnosed initially.
Okay.
And then I got diagnosed, and fortunately for me, it is a very treatable cancer. So it was testicular cancer, and I had surgery to remove the original mass. And I was in a place where I felt really fortunate, but it also was a relatively easy surgery. It was a surgery. It was a scary surgery. It wasn't pleasant, but it was a pretty quick recovery. And I was kind of the first round and I was ready to get back in my life. I was kind of like, all right, done that, done and dusted, let's move forward.
Yeah.
And I was ready to move on and pretend it kind of didn't happen. But then last year it came back.
Right.
And it was now, it had metastasized into some lymph nodes in my abdomen. So it felt much more like the cancer was like in me than it did originally. And it required a much more intensive surgery that required a much longer recovery. And it was scary. It was unpleasant. It was scary. The recovery was much harder than I thought it would be. And here's the thing. A lot of people came to me when I first announced, and I announced it publicly the second time that I had cancer, that it was back. I didn't announce it publicly. I really didn't share it the first time. But the thing that I feel so fortunate about, that I think all of these practices have given me, and I think cancer has amplified, is I never felt bad for myself. I never felt like, oh, woe is me. How could this happen to me? I've had my father died of cancer. His sister, my aunt, died of cancer. My grandmother died of cancer. I've seen this play out in such a nasty way that thinking through, you have to go through some suffering, but they're going to be able to treat it. You have options. All I could think about was all the people who would pay as much money as they had to be in my shoes. All the people who would kill to have a prognosis like mine. And I stopped and said, I'm young. Other than the cancer, I'm healthy. I have treatment options. I can afford these treatment options. How blessed am I? How fortunate am I? And that has stuck with me. Anytime, and I still get stuck in these day-to-day moments where like, traffic again, but it's so much easier for me to pop out of it and say, and I come back to this phrase, if this is the worst thing that happens to me today, I'll consider myself lucky. I say that all the time, and it really reinforces itself because I truly feel it and I truly believe it, because I've had the day twice now where I get the call saying, you've got cancer. And I can go back to that moment and think, well, traffic doesn't really mean much compared to this. Or botching a presentation doesn't really mean much compared to this. And so the perspective shift has been transformational.
Yeah, perspective is huge.
And to bring it back to kind of what we've been talking about, Dawn, the connection that has come out of it, I was really hesitant whether or not to share it publicly. I didn't want to share it and feel like I was sharing it to get something or anything. I was really self-conscious about sharing this. The people in my life that showed up, it still gets me overwhelmed, because people I've known my entire life, people I barely know, came and said, I don't know what I can do, but anything, please, please, please. People I've met once came and they'd say, oh my gosh, Jamie, I'm so sorry to hear that. And all of a sudden, I viscerally felt my connection to people across the world in a way that I had never felt before. And that feeling doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And so now, yes, people have moved on with their lives as they should, but I know that I'm being held and hugged and supported by so many more people than I ever imagined.
Right.
And it's really given me much more of an appreciation for the depth of human connection and human love.
That's beautiful. It is.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's sad that it takes something like that for people to reach out, like, oh my gosh, not Jamie, I need to reach out to him and let him know, it's instead of just a normal day for you where I was just thinking about you. How are you doing? Why don't we do that more? We need to just be more aware of the people that we know. And if they come to our mind, that's the moment that you reach out to them and just say, hey, you just popped into my head. Who wouldn't want to hear that? Who wouldn't want to get a text like that? Like, oh, you were thinking of me? Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. I think just those little things make other people feel so good and so connected. And that's what we need now. We need human connection to come back and, scrap the AI stuff for making work easier sometimes or whatever, but not connection. Not with humans.
Absolutely. Have you found that that's something that you've done more of since you started the podcast, that you've had this realization where you're like, I want to be more proactive about how I connect with others?
Yeah, and I have made friends through my podcast guests, which is really cool. It didn't have to be that way. It could have been a one and done interview, and here I aired it. That's it for our relationship. But no, I've maintained connections with a lot of the people that were on my podcast, and that's super cool. Just to we're not besties, but I definitely respect them, and I was so glad to meet them and hear their opinions and their expert feedback. I don't know. I just think that that's such a cool, podcasting is such a cool platform. I'm so excited that you're doing it, Jamie. I think you're going to be great at it, and I think you're going to love it because you do love people. It shows, and it's going to show through, and people are going to pick up on that.
Yeah. Oh, I've been loving it thus far in my short kind of early stages here, and it's fundamentally different than trying to put out content in short form. When you're trying to reach people, there's a lot of ways to reach people and to help people. And I started by trying to do that much more through these short form videos, through Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn content, which I still think is a great way to connect and to help people out. But there's nothing to replace a really good conversation.
Yeah.
And when you can do that with people who you're not bound geographically by, we don't have to be in the same room. You open up your potential network of great insights and great collaborators. And I'm so excited to just have more conversation and to expand my own mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of selfish in that way. You feel kind of selfish in that way because you're helping the listener, but you're also getting to help yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I get to have this awesome conversation and meet these awesome people. And it's all a great experience. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah. I've one last question for you as we wrap up.
Yeah.
And I want to make it a real difficult one. No.
Great.
Right. I know. Just to end on an easy note here. So you've recently decided to stop podcasting.
Yes.
And you made your announcement, I think it was just last week that...
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It's my last episode.
What does that feel like for you? What is this last chapter? What did it give you? What did it take away? How did you get to this place to make this decision? And are you at peace with it? How are you feeling?
I am at peace with it. Yeah. And when I said my goodbye, I did not say, I might, pick it back up. I didn't want to put any promises out there for anybody. Not that people are waiting with bated breath or anything.
Maybe.
But I also didn't want to put that pressure on myself. Like, I told people I would come back, so, but no, my family's growing. I've got almost 5 grandkids now. When I started it, it was not that. I was still behind the chair and doing hair, and so much has changed since then. And I really feel like I talked about all the stuff that has interested me thus far. And I just felt like, I think the 4-year mark is good. I wanted to quit while I was still up. My numbers were still great. They were still growing. I was kind of like, should I? But, that's easy to go back and forth. And I'm the worst. I changed my mind 5 million times. So, I'm glad that I made the decision. I didn't tell anybody. Nobody knew.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want anybody to try and talk me out of it and say, but you love it. And people are saying that now.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, but it was just time. It just felt right. So I am very proud of what I put out there. I'm very proud of my podcast. I'm proud of what it helped me become as a person.
Yeah.
And just all the people, the connections I made. So no regrets at all, but I am very at peace with being done. Yes.
I love that. And for those of you listening and who have, I'm sure, loved our conversation with Dawn today, you can find her existing episodes, which are going to stay up under Dawnversations or Dawnversations in My Head on YouTube and other places you get your podcasts. I've been a guest, and I'm so fortunate, Dawn, that we've had the opportunity to meet, because not only is it a pleasure to know you, but it's been a pleasure to explore everything you've brought to the table in your own podcast. And for the shorter-lived Dawnversations in My Head, where you're talking to Carol in your head, it is an inspiring approach to podcasting, and it resonates so hard with me. For those of you listening, if you've ever had that voice in your head, we know you have. Listen to it. listen to Dawn's reflections. It's going to resonate with you, and you're going to fall in love in the same way that I have with everything Dawn brings to the table. Dawn, it is such a pleasure having you in my life and having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jamie, for asking me. I was so honored that you even wanted me to be on the show. I'm so excited for you and excited for your show. I will definitely be listening or watching.
Yeah. Well,
I'll
it's going to be
consuming, whatever.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dawn. We'll see you soon. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations to come.
All right. Thanks, Jamie. Bye-bye.